Ok. So, olá a todos, brasileiros e canadenses. Welcome, Canadians. Bem-vindo, Canadian. Bem-vindos, brasileiros. I'm going to talk a bit in English, a little bit in Portuguese. No French today. So, my name is Eliana Russi. I'm the executive at Brazil Games Association, which represents the studios developing games in Brazil. Eu sou Eliana Russi, da AbraGames, que representa os estúdios de desenvolvimento do Brasil e as empresas independentes em geral. Hoje é mais uma ação da AbraGames que se chama AbraTalks. A gente tem feito uma série de reuniões com diversos países e temas para explorar um pouco mais a capacidade de abrir novos negócios, novas parcerias, novas amizades, inclusive, no mundo dos games, para as empresas brasileiras. O Canadá é um amigo muito antigo na área de audiovisual, de games, muito forte, amigo do Brasil, eu digo, temos parcerias muito boas. O Canadá hoje é um dos maiores produtores de games do mundo, com políticas públicas muito interessantes, aí que o Marcelo vai apresentar, então vai ser uma sessão muito bacana. Para quem está no Brasil, fico eu de ponto de contato na AbraGames, a Cláudia Kakunaka, que depois entra no final no Consulado do Canadá, e o Marcelo também no Consulado do Canadá. Então, vou desejar a todos um ótimo evento. Well, I'm just saying, thanks for the Canadians that are speaking today. Brazil and Canada have a great and beautiful history of friendship on the audiovisual and games. It goes like beyond, before Claudia and myself. So it's going to be a beautiful re-encounter today, and I hope we can make new friends and new games and do business. So it's up to Jason. No, Marcelo now. Please, Marcelo, can you take it?
Yes. Obrigado, Eliana. Boa tarde a todos. É um prazer estar aqui com todos vocês. Good afternoon to everybody in Canada. Temos aí um público grande para participar nessa tarde. Meu nome é Marcelo Tavares, eu trabalho numa agência de fomento de negócios do governo do Canadá aqui no Brasil. Trabalho com a Cláudia Kakunaka, que alguns de vocês já devem conhecer. Ficamos muito felizes de poder participar dessa edição para falar um pouco sobre o Canadá no evento da AbraGames. Com certeza é um setor de bastante interesse, que tem muita oportunidade para ser explorada entre o Brasil e o Canadá. Tem uma apresentação bem rápida, tive um probleminha aqui, então se a Suda puder colocá-la na tela. Vou falar um pouco sobre os benefícios que o governo do Canadá oferecem para essa indústria especificamente, por que as empresas brasileiras e empresas globais estão indo para o Canadá. E espero que vocês tenham algumas perguntas aí ao final para que a gente possa responder. Logo depois da minha apresentação, a gente tem um painel com os especialistas do setor, né, que estão aí no Canadá. O Jason vai moderar uma mesa redonda, um debate que eu acho que vai ser muito interessante. Então, eu vou rapidamente começar aqui no próximo slide, né, mostrando um pouco por que o Canadá se tornou um destino interessante, não só para a indústria de games, mas para indústrias de tecnologia e inovação como um todo, né? Primeiro, eu acho que tem dois aspectos que vale colocar, principalmente quando a gente compara o ambiente de negócios, né? O Canadá tem uma facilidade muito grande, um ambiente de negócio pouco burocrático, uma facilidade grande de fazer negócio, né? De você levar a sua empresa, levar o seu estúdio, se instalar naquele país e de lá poder expandir, poder desenvolver suas soluções ali, criar conteúdo e de lá também se expandir para outros mercados, né? O Canadá é um país do tamanho do Brasil, com uma população menor do que a população do estado de São Paulo, né? 36 milhões de habitantes. O PIB canadense está muito concentrado na fronteira dos Estados Unidos, então 200 quilômetros dessa fronteira é onde realmente tem as principais cidades, os principais polos de desenvolvimento, e é onde você encontra as maiores empresas também. Como é um país que depende muito do comércio internacional, essa questão de acessar outros mercados através do Canadá é um ponto também que eu vou destacar na minha apresentação. Outra questão é o reconhecimento do empreendedorismo. O Canadá tem uma política aberta de imigração, de internacionalização de negócios para boas ideias, empreendedores que tenham soluções inovadoras, que possam ter um impacto positivo na sua indústria. Então, o Canadá realmente hoje, a gente vê alguns países se fechando para a imigração, o Canadá permanece aberto para a imigração de talentos, reconhece esse empreendedorismo global e tem se tornado um destino preferencial para empresas de vários países, né? Próximo slide, por favor. Tem algumas questões, em particular, na indústria de games, que eu queria destacar, que é a questão do talento, né, que você encontra no Canadá, né? Existe uma força de trabalho altamente qualificada para esse setor no Canadá. Em geral, 57% dos canadenses economicamente ativos têm curso superior. Então, você encontra profissionais altamente capacitados, com uma boa experiência profissional e uma boa base teórica também para trabalhar no seu projeto. A indústria de games no Canadá é uma indústria de referência mundial, né? Tem empresas globais de todos os tamanhos que estão lá, empresas indies também se destacando, desenvolvendo seus conteúdos no Canadá. Por que eles escolheram o Canadá, né? Acho que um dos principais pontos que eu destacaria aqui, eu acho que o Jason e os colegas vão poder confirmar depois, é a questão dos subsídios. O Canadá oferece, tanto do governo federal como o governo das províncias, oferecem subsídios para investimento em inovação, em tecnologia, em pesquisa e desenvolvimento, e também subsídios que podem ser aplicados aos salários dos profissionais que trabalham no seu projeto. Então, hoje, se você for olhar o custo de produção que uma empresa tem no Brasil, e se ela considerar que esse custo no Canadá ele pode ser reduzido, o custo de salário e o custo de investimento à inovação em até 50%, dependendo da província, passa realmente a ser uma opção muito interessante. Eu vou destacar também que, quando a gente fala de internacionalização, a gente está falando de empresas de todos os tamanhos, né? Tem grandes estúdios, grandes empresas indo para o Canadá, também tem pequenas empresas de todos os setores, pequenos estúdios independentes, escolhendo o Canadá para instalar uma operação. A vantagem também que eu gostaria de falar para vocês é que, diferente de outros mercados, não existe uma exigência por parte do governo canadense que o projeto de internacionalização do seu negócio esteja vinculado a um investimento inicial de um determinado valor. Por exemplo, em alguns mercados, para você levar a sua empresa, o projeto de internacionalização ele está vinculado a um investimento inicial de alguns milhares de dólares. No Canadá, não. Você pode levar a sua empresa, você pode incorporar a sua empresa no Canadá. Claro, você vai ter o custo de incorporação, que é um custo muito baixo. O Canadá, hoje, tem um custo 30% mais barato de operação do que os Estados Unidos, em média 18% com outros mercados, né, do G7. E isso se transfere também para o teu custo operacional. Você não tem essa exigência de aportar um investimento inicial para o negócio, é bastante interessante. Você pode incorporar a empresa, começar a contratar seus funcionários profissionais da área com o subsídio do governo. Uma vez incorporada, a empresa passa a ser uma empresa canadense e já está elegível a receber todos os apoios do governo federal, do apoio dos governos das províncias, e esses apoios acabam constituindo um ganho muito grande no custo operacional dessa empresa. Então, você não ter a necessidade de fazer um investimento inicial, poder começar de uma forma pequena. Você pode ter um funcionário, trabalhar num coworking ou trabalhar num espaço seu, independente. Todos esses modelos são modelos que a gente vê quando a gente fala de projetos de internacionalização dos estúdios. Hoje, só um último dado aqui nesse slide, são mais de 700 estúdios de games no Canadá, canadenses e internacionais, né? Próximo, por favor. Essa questão do apoio à inovação, realmente, acho que é um dos pontos mais interessantes que as empresas consideram no seu projeto de expansão, né? Que tipo de ambiente que eu vou estar entrando, quem são esses players, que tipo de apoio eu vou ter, qual é o meu custo. Então, o Canadá, o governo do Canadá, ele fez uma política de desenvolver alguns setores específicos, né? Então, são clusters de inovação que concentram ali investimentos públicos do governo federal, do governo da província, do governo das cidades, uma concentração de empresas daquele setor, participação muito forte, muito presente das universidades, dos institutos de pesquisa e de educação, que criam um ecossistema muito rico para você desenvolver, para você primeiro estar presente ali e desenvolver o seu conteúdo. Um desses clusters é um cluster de indústria criativa, onde o setor de games é uma das principais referências, né? O Canadá tem um dos melhores programas de apoio e incentivo a P&D no G7. Todo o investimento que uma empresa que está no Canadá faz em inovação, em pesquisa, em soluções, ela pode abater do imposto de renda até 40% desse investimento, dependendo da província. Quer dizer, é uma vantagem que você não encontra em outros países, em outros mercados. Todo o investimento que você faz em maquinário, em pessoal, em P&D realmente, você consegue abater no imposto de renda no final do ano da empresa até 40%, o que é uma grande vantagem do ponto de vista fiscal e de custos, né? Tem outras questões do Canadá ter o menor custo para investimento em pesquisa e desenvolvimento do G7. Geralmente, os estúdios, as empresas que estão indo para o Canadá, elas, nas suas pesquisas iniciais, elas olham o mercado norte-americano, mas prioritariamente o mercado dos Estados Unidos. A questão é que, comparando os dois mercados, o Canadá leva uma vantagem do ponto de vista do custo, da facilidade de você contratar esse profissional, e você, aí, comparando com o mercado americano, você tem um custo aí de pelo menos 30% de vantagem para o mercado canadense, sem falar que, com os acordos comerciais que o Canadá possui, a sua empresa no Canadá pode vender as suas soluções, atender clientes no mercado americano, no mercado mexicano, em outros mercados da Europa, da Ásia, América do Sul, inclusive, que são os vários acordos comerciais que o Canadá possui e que, uma vez você instalado lá, você já pode contar também com esse apoio. Próximo, por favor. Uma outra questão que a gente até brinca, né, falando de qualidade de vida, e o pessoal sempre fala, mas é muito frio, né? O Canadá é muito frio. Os canadenses que trabalham aqui no Brasil dizem que passam mais frio aqui em São Paulo do que no Canadá, porque a estrutura está preparada para você passar um inverno canadense, né? Então, você tem calefação dos lugares, existem estruturas de calçamento e de passagens subterrâneas, então você não fica exposto àquele frio todo. As seasons, né, as estações são bem específicas, então você tem um inverno, mas depois você tem uma primavera, você tem um outono, tem o verão, então é realmente gostoso para quem quer ter essa experiência, né? O inverno não atrapalha os negócios. Acho que a Cláudia e eu tivemos numa missão em Montreal, no inverno, estava realmente muito frio, todas as pessoas indo para o seu trabalho, as escolas funcionando, o transporte público funcionando. Então, a questão do clima é mais um mito, né? A qualidade de vida do Canadá está entre as melhores do mundo. Tem 4 cidades que estão entre as top 25, né? Vancouver, Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal. Então, são cidades onde você realmente consegue viver muito bem. Eu faço aqui um parênteses, né? Porque, comparando com o Brasil, é difícil, né? Porque o Canadá é um país com pouca desigualdade, né? A estrutura social canadense é de uma classe média muito grande, então, na pirâmide canadense, a classe média é o maior bolo dessa pirâmide, então as desigualdades são bem menores, a remuneração para os trabalhos são remunerações que você consegue sobreviver com dignidade, então isso faz com que você tenha uma qualidade de vida, sem falar questões de segurança, educação, saúde, serviços públicos de qualidade e sem custo para quem está morando lá, né? Próximo, por favor. Um dos grandes programas de atração de investidores, né, e de empresas para o Canadá, ele está vinculado a um programa de imigração também, que é o Startup Visa. Startup Visa é um visto para empreendedores qualificados, né, que querem levar os seus negócios inovadores para o Canadá. E ele tem 4 pilares aí. Como é que as empresas se qualificam, como é que o founder, o executivo da empresa, se qualifica para esse programa de Startup Visa, para ele fazer esse processo de imigração, né? Primeiro, a empresa ela precisa estar aceita em uma das aceleradoras credenciadas pelo governo, ou ter um investimento de um anjo, um investidor anjo, ou de um venture capital. As aceleradoras, o venture capital e o investidor anjo, existe uma lista que eu posso compartilhar com vocês depois, de todas as aceleradoras, os anjos e os venture capitals que são pré-qualificados pelo governo. Então, muitas empresas brasileiras estão indo para o Canadá através de aceleradoras, programas de soft landing, onde elas podem acelerar o seu negócio, e o executivo acaba fazendo o processo de imigração através desse programa Startup Visa. Sem contar que é um mercado onde ainda existe uma política flexível para a imigração, diferente de outros mercados que estão mais restritos. Então, você ainda consegue participar desses programas que incluem também a sua família, né? O próximo, por favor. Eu falei inicialmente, né, que eu trabalho aqui no Consulado do Canadá, numa agência de fomento de negócios, a gente chama aqui de Trade Commissioner Service. A gente tem uma operação de apoio a empresas brasileiras que queiram conhecer o Canadá do ponto de vista de achar um parceiro comercial, fazer a contratação de uma solução que pode estar sendo desenvolvida por uma empresa canadense, ou então interessados a expandir o seu negócio para o Canadá. Nós temos uma presença grande aqui no Brasil, a nossa estrutura no Brasil é bastante extensa, né? Nós temos escritórios em São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, Brasília, Porto Alegre, Recife e Belo Horizonte. Então, é uma estrutura grande. O nosso trabalho é identificar oportunidades de negócios para empresas canadenses no Brasil e para empresas brasileiras irem para o Canadá, né? A gente organiza programas de visitas, missões comerciais, participação de eventos. E essa estrutura, ela trabalha para as empresas canadenses de forma gratuita. Então, você conta com uma consultoria comercial de forma gratuita em outros mercados. Ela está presente em mais de 100 países. Então, uma vez no Canadá, se você tiver interesse em levar o seu negócio, vamos supor, para a Coreia do Sul ou para o México, a estrutura do Trade Commissioner Service nesses países pode te ajudar a identificar uma oportunidade, um parceiro, participar de uma missão ou de um evento específico naquele mercado de forma gratuita. Então, é uma grande vantagem também que o governo canadense oferece para as empresas que estão incorporadas no Canadá. Eu não digo nem empresas canadenses, né? Empresas incorporadas lá. Além dessa estrutura do governo federal, que a gente tem aqui no Brasil, aqui em São Paulo, a gente também tem a presença de um escritório de negócios do governo de Quebec, da província de Quebec. Então, dividimos o escritório aqui em São Paulo com o escritório da província de Quebec, que também tem o mesmo mandato, né? Buscar oportunidades para empresas da província aqui no Brasil e identificar empresas brasileiras que queiram conhecer um pouco mais sobre o ambiente de negócios, as vantagens de se instalar por lá e expandir o seu negócio a partir da província de Quebec. Todos esses apoios são sem custo, então é uma consultoria que fica à disposição das empresas interessadas. Próximo, por favor. Terminando aqui minha participação de forma rápida, porque eu sei que o debate que vem aí vai ser muito interessante. Eu só queria destacar um evento que a gente participa anualmente, que é o Mega Migs em Montreal, né? A maior feira de games do Canadá. Tem algumas fotos aqui do ano passado. Nós levamos uma delegação de, acho que 10 empresas de todo o Brasil. E esse ano, claro, como todos os outros eventos, né, vai acontecer de forma virtual, no dia 12 e dia 13 de novembro. A gente vai começar a recrutar as empresas interessadas em participarem de forma virtual dessa conferência. Então, se alguns de vocês que estão aí nos ouvindo tiverem interesse, por favor, façam contato. A gente pode passar mais detalhes aí depois, explicar como é que vai funcionar. Mas, com certeza, é um evento interessante que você consegue ali agora, né, em 2 dias, ter uma ideia de como funciona esse ambiente de negócio no Canadá, como é que a indústria de games está se desenvolvendo, o que está sendo feito, quais são as oportunidades e como é que as empresas brasileiras podem se inserir nesse mercado, né? No ano passado, a gente teve 2 estúdios que se instalaram por lá e o feedback que a gente tem é muito positivo, né? O fato do Canadá ser um país miscigenado como o Brasil, ter muitos estrangeiros, permite que uma empresa estrangeira, uma empresa brasileira, quando se instala, ela seja bem recebida e um fator que eu acho determinante, né? Não se sentir... acho que inferiorizado é uma palavra muito forte, né? Mas sofrer algum tipo de preconceito por não ser uma empresa nacional. Não existe isso no Canadá. As empresas, não só de games, mas de outros setores, nos dão um feedback de forma bastante positiva com relação a como eles foram recebidos no mercado, o fato de haver um suporte grande das agências de negócios em cada uma das cidades que elas escolhem para se instalar, fazendo com que elas possam se inserir naquele ecossistema, conhecer fornecedores, conhecer as universidades, fazer parte dos eventos que acontecem, não se sentir isolados, porque é o que às vezes acontece em muitos mercados. A empresa vai e ela se sente completamente isolada, um pouco sem acesso ao que está acontecendo. Então, acho que, para terminar, eu acho que eu gostaria de deixar com vocês a ideia que o projeto do Canadá é um projeto muito de círculo virtuoso, né? Você poder levar a sua empresa numa condição mais facilitada, se instalar naquele mercado, e aí crescer e prosperar. E aí sim, pagar impostos, contratar pessoas, mas o principal é você ter um bom projeto que pode ganhar escala a partir do Canadá. Meu último slide tem os meus contatos e o contato da Cláudia. Ficamos aqui em São Paulo. Depois, quem tiver alguma dúvida, quiser conversar, a gente está à disposição. Vai entrar daí daqui a pouquinho, senão depois a gente coloca aí no final. E eu queria agora passar a palavra também para o Jason, que vai coordenar essa mesa redonda, esse debate. Agora a gente muda a chave para o inglês. O Jason Della Rocca é um empreendedor, muita gente conhece ele aqui no Brasil, né? Um empreendedor da indústria de games, é um investidor, um expert do setor, né? Tem bastante ligação com o Brasil. Toda vez que alguém fala do Jason, o comentário que eu ouço sempre é: ele é quase brasileiro. Eu acho que sim. Se ele ri é porque ele entende bem português, ele está rindo. Então, eu deixo vocês com o Jason e com os nossos colegas de mesa e desejo a todos aí um bom debate. Um abraço a todos. Obrigado.
All right. Obrigado, Marcelo. Oi, boa tarde. Yeah, unfortunately, that's all my Portuguese, so we'll be doing the panel session in English. You can ask questions in Portuguese or English in the chat. As we get towards the end of the session, we will open the floor to questions from our attendees, so you're welcome to pop those into the chat. Great honor, great pleasure to be doing this session. I've been going down to Brazil for about a decade, at least once or twice a year, most often for the big festival, of course, but for other events and initiatives. So really missing everyone in Brazil right now, and wishing we obviously we're able to be together. We're going to dig into what it's like to be up here in Canada and make games, and some of the benefits and challenges and all the fun stuff that we have going on up here. We have a lovely panel with us today. We have Jason Hilche, who's the president of the Entertainment Software Association of Canada. We have Tanya Short, who's the co-founder and creative director at KitFox. And when we have Francis Bayet, who's VP Corporate Affairs at Ubisoft here in Montreal. And unfortunately, one of our panelists had to step down at the last minute. We had Deidre Airy, who is the head of operations of Other Ocean, who's literally on the other ocean, all the way on the Atlantic side of the country. So unfortunately, she wasn't able to make the call and had to step down at the last minute. So we'll make do with the rest of our awesome panelists. To get us started, what I'll do is allow each of the panelists just to quickly introduce themselves, and we'll start digging into the details from there. Let's go to Jason first. Jason, if you can just give us a quick intro.
Thanks, Jason, and thank you, everybody. It looks like we've got about 90 people here, so really pleased to be doing this today. So my name is Jason Hilchey. I'm the president and CEO of the Entertainment Software Association of Canada. We are the trade association for the video game industry in Canada. We represent a lot of the main larger publisher, developers, distributors, as well as developers in Canada as well. Jason, are you looking for me to give an overview of the industry, or just that quick intro?
Yeah, just a quick intro for now. We'll get into the industry overview shortly. So, all right, let's turn to Tanya. Tanya, just a quick intro.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Tanya, X short, and I'm the captain of Kitbox Games. We're a small indie studio. It's been around for about 7 years now, where we're 9 people. We used to go to an office in downtown Montreal. That's not happening right now, so I'm here at home. But yeah, we've been very fortunate to benefit from many of the advantages of Canada and Montreal in particular. So, you know, things are in flux all the time, but I'm happy to talk about our experiences, and I hope to meet more of you in the future.
Awesome. Thank you, Tanya. And Francis, just a quick intro, please.
Yes, so I'm Francis Baillier. I'm VP Corporate Affairs at Ubisoft. Most of you must know Ubisoft. You must know that we have a studio in Sao Paulo, and we have 7 studios here in Canada and 55 studios around the world. So it's a great opportunity to talk to you about my home country and country to those 7 studios in Canada. So thanks to the government of Canada and to Abra Games for making this happen. Really appreciate it.
All right, thank you so much. All right, so those are our awesome panelists that we'll have with us for the next 45 minutes or so. And Jason, why don't we go to you just to kind of kick us off to give us a little more depth on the Canadian ecosystem. Of course, Marcelo did a very high-level overview of Canada, but let's go into a little more depth from the ESA perspective.
Sure. So yes, thanks Marcelo for that great presentation, and you know, thanks to the Consulate General of Canada in Brazil for putting this on, and Invest in Canada, and everyone for the invitation today, and you know, to my fellow panelists and Jason for always being a great moderator. So you know, the Canadian industry is it's quite an awesome thing. You know, I mean, we've got about 700 video game studios in Canada. Obviously, you're familiar with the big names. You know, Ubisoft with Francis on our panel, you know, Electronic Arts in Vancouver, where they make FIFA, and you know, big studios like Eidos and those types of big hits, those hit-driven studios. But the reality is that about the 700 studios that exist in Canada, about 86% of them are smaller independent studios. The vast majority of our industry are small independent studios. Now, the vast employment in our industry, most of the jobs are in the large studios like the Ubisofts of the world. But from a studio perspective, we are primarily a large industry of independent, smaller Canadian-owned studios. We've got about 28,000 full-time jobs in our industry. Those full-time direct jobs support another 22,000 spinoffs. So there's about 50,000 jobs, but the official number is 48,000, but that was about a year ago. So almost 50,000 direct and indirect jobs being supported from the industry. And that's contributing almost $5 billion to Canadian GDP. So $4.5 billion is being driven toward our GDP just from the games industry alone, and it's quite large. To give you an idea with respect to employment, a couple of years ago I went to Australia and I helped my friend who runs the trade association there, and at the time, you know, a similar sized country, a little smaller, they had about 950 employees in the video game industry there, while we were, you know, pushing about 25,000. So we are quite a large industry for the number of people that we have, and you know, we're something that we do as an association. Obviously, is today you're looking at potentially making a decision to put a studio in Canada or move to Canada to work for a studio. And, you know, our organization's primary objective is to ensure that, you know, once you're here, we're doing everything that we can to make sure that those incentives that drew you here are protected, that the government understands the industry and its importance, and that the media and the public see games as a positive driving force in society. And so our organization's primary purpose is to support the industry that's already here, not so much attracting industry here, but you can be sure that if you do decide to set up something in Canada, that there is a strong trade association that has the ear of government, and that we're here to protect and promote that industry. So that's a good overview of the industry here and what we do, I think.
What wonderful. And Jason, maybe just as a point of clarification, when you say that the game industry contributes about $4.5 billion to the GDP, you're talking about the revenue of the companies, not like the consumer spend that players are spending on games.
Yeah, actually, yeah. So what it actually is comprised of is three different things. It's the direct salaries that the companies pay out, which makes up the vast majority of that 4.5 billion. It's the salaries that are paid by the indirect jobs that are supported by our industry, and then it's all of the things that those people buy that contribute to you know, a wholesome picture. So it actually has nothing to do with sales at all. You know, in fact, our sales in Canada, I believe, are smaller than the amount of money that's contributed to the economy from the development of games, which is rare.
Yeah, so. Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting, yeah, because as a consumer market, Canada is a relatively small population. I mean, certainly tiny compared to Brazil, but it's more so that the actual economic impact of the companies is, as you say, that sort of $4.5 billion GDP contribution.
That's right.
Which is certainly impressive. All right, well, Jason, thank you so much for that brief overview. Speaking of the fact that many of the studios here in Canada are indies and startups and smaller studios, I'd like to turn to Tanya, who is one of the founders of such a studio, just to give us a bit more background on how KitFox was started and a little bit sort of what it's like to be a startup / indie studio here in Canada. Tanya.
Sure. So I've actually, Tanya, I've lived in several countries. I'm originally American. I've lived in Japan and Norway, and eventually I moved to Montreal. And I came here originally as part of a bigger studio, but there were so many amazing initiatives here that Jason De La Roca convinced me to take a plunge and try to make an indie studio on my own. And he showed me how many resources there are here. It wasn't as scary a plunge as I think it would have been in a lot of other scenarios. So not only, I mean, at that time, you know, he was running an incubator, which made an investment in us, and that incubator unfortunately isn't around anymore. But we have benefited primarily, I would say, from the fact that the Montreal indie game community is so supportive and so helpful, and regardless of which organizations sort of come and go, like right now there's something called La Guild, which is sort of an association of studio heads, and, you know, MIGs and megas undergoing various transformations. Sometimes there's investment programs through the Business Development Bank of Canada, or Jason will shout from the mountaintops whenever there's new programs going on that you can apply to. But sort of regardless of what's going on in any given moment, I feel like one of the biggest strengths of Montreal to me and for KitFox has been the fact that everyone here is so supportive and encouraging to each other. And so when there's an event and when there's information, people are sharing it with each other very freely. They're, you know, they're not getting competitive or selfish or territorial about things. And what that means is that we all can benefit each other from that spirit. And So whether, we can talk a lot about the Canadian Media Fund, which is fantastic, especially if you already have an experienced team who's made one game. They can really help you reach the next level with trying to innovate more and trying to grow your studio for your second game. But to me, the heart of it is really the community. And I've tried to help KitFox be part of that community. And in my own time running my own community org and everything like that, because I think if we don't help each other, we're losing one of our big advantages. I mean, we have Ubisoft here, and they're a big knowledgeable entity, and I'm never gonna have all of the insights and resources and experiences that Ubisoft has. But together with the other 680 indies, maybe we can compare notes a little bit. And we're not fighting Ubisoft either. We're also cooperating with Ubisoft. Don't get me wrong. But it is difficult sometimes when you feel like you're all alone. And I've never felt that way. So that's my number one
Cool.
love for Montreal, for sure.
Yeah, well, and so obviously you're based in Montreal, and so that's sort of a very Montreal perspective. But I mean, would you attribute that kind of community feel and helpfulness pretty much nationwide? I mean, is that what you feel from other developers across the country?
Yeah, I mean, I actually just spent 3 months in Vancouver, and the community there is also extremely, extremely supportive. They have a yearly event called the Indie Summit, I think is what it's called, and it's a fantastic one-day event with talks and community, and they have monthly meetups, or they used to have monthly meetups and all this sorts of thing. And I do think it is a bit of a Canadian spirit, because it's a friendly country, but also values art and collaboration. And I don't know, I mean, we started out, we were 4 people making a little game that was like on mobile and on Steam. And now, we're 9 people, which is small by most company standards, but by indie standards, it's kind of medium sized. And we're developing 2 games and publishing 3 other games. So we have a lot going on. And I think none of that would have been possible without the support of the Canadian community.
Wonderful. Awesome. Great to hear. All right. Well, let's go to all the way the other end of the spectrum to Ubisoft. And Francis, if you can give us just sort of a snapshot of the scale of Ubisoft's presence in Canada, and then just sort of your thoughts on operating such a big operation here in Canada, and maybe kind of a word on the talent. Francis, maybe you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
right.
I'm back. And so just to make sure, you want me to do that in 2 minutes?
Yeah, well, okay, yeah, the quick version.
So, yeah, the quick version is that we set shop in 1997 in Montreal. It was a great opportunity to grow our operations out of Europe, and also a great opportunity to create jobs for the youth. Unemployment was very high at the time in Quebec, and the government saw Ubisoft as a great way to extend jobs of the future to the younger generation and to reduce unemployment. So great strategy. And so to attract Ubisoft, the Quebec government said, listen, we're going to put this brilliant strategy together where we will offer you tax incentive to set up your studio in Quebec, in Montreal. And in return, there will be a return on investment, obviously. So the return on investment today is actually a huge economic return. So the value that Jason referred to in terms of GDP impact is partly brought by Ubisoft, obviously. But there's also a return from a tax incentive perspective, since all the employees and the corporation are paying taxes back to the state or the province of Quebec. So that brilliant strategy actually was followed not only in Quebec, but it was found as a very interesting strategy and put in place in other provinces. So today, if you look at the map of Canada, almost all provinces from coast to coast have a tax incentive strategy to attract video game studios in their province. Now, the surprising thing that we found in Canada is that not only was it a great landscape from a cost point of view and an investment point of view, but talent was massively present in Canada. So we were able to open studios in Montreal, in Quebec City, in Saguenay. Saguenay is a very smaller town, and we have almost 100 employee-sized studio over there. We were able to open a studio in Nova Scotia, in the hometown of Jason Hilsey in Halifax, and it's also nearing the 100 employees. And last but not least, we were able to open a studio in Winnipeg. You know, so when you look at every opportunities to connect talent with great cost of doing business, with great capacity to build and grow a studio, what we were able to do in Canada is to reach today the size of almost 6,000 employees. And out of those 6,000, we have about 5,000 making games. So the Assassin's Creed, the Far Cry, the Watch Dogs of this world. But also what is not known is that we have almost 1,000 employees making cloud services, live services, cybersecurity, hosting, network management, infrastructure. So all of these people that are not necessarily making games, but they are connected to the back end and making sure that our games can run smoothly when you actually access it as a player. So this was all possible in Canada.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. So speaking of the talent, you know, I think having the tax incentives and obviously a favorable business environment is a big part of what makes Canada attractive. But you know, the talent, as you said, Francis, is so critical. Maybe if Jason, if you have some insight you can share with regards to the schools, like the number of schools we have that are addressing game degrees and stuff, and if that's something that you track through the ESA, can you comment quick on the some of the talent pipelines?
Yeah, we've done some surveys of school programs in the past, and there's about 70 different schools offering programs across Canada that offer video game development of some sort. And I'm talking both from the university side of things, which are mostly the software engineering, computer programming, that side of the dev business. And then a lot of private colleges and government-owned colleges that do a lot of level design, what they would call game design courses and programs, and then 3D animation, art. A lot of that comes from that stream. So we're pretty good across Canada. I know Quebec does quite well and has probably been the most successful province, and I'll give Francis and Ubisoft a lot of credit on this for really connecting to the academic world and working with them to make sure that they have the programs available, but also then supporting them through various different programs and competitions and contests and mentorship and co-op placements. And you know, I can tell you that our organization runs a Canadian student video game competition, and the last 4 years of the 6 years that we've had it, the winning team has been from Quebec. It hasn't always been a blowout, but the last 4 of the 6 years we've run this has been a team from Quebec, and I really do think that has a lot to do with the maturity of the industry that exists in Quebec, and the large companies that have really spent a lot of time working you know, with academia and getting them to develop the type of talent that they need. Now, it does exist across Canada. I won't say that it's only in Quebec, but it's very strong in Quebec. And I know, Jason, you've got a lot of experience with that as well. So. Yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to make this about Canada and not just about you know, Quebec and Montreal. So just
for sure,
of course.
And like I said, these partnerships do exist. And I know that in British Columbia, Electronic Arts and other big studios out there have worked very, very closely with the academic community and are tied in, you know, with the Center for Digital Media in Burnaby, which is really just down the street from the large EA campus, and the Vancouver Film School. They were the first ones to win our contest. They've got a great program out there as well for game development. So it isn't just Quebec. I'm just, you know, from my experience. And I think it really does have to do with the maturity of the Quebec industry. I mean, as you said, And as Francis said, I mean, it really is where it kind of started, right? So it's really no surprise to me that the connections with academic institutions are the strongest in the largest cluster that we have.
Yeah, understood. All right, well, sticking with the talent theme, turning back to Tanya, I mean, obviously, as a smaller studio where you only have 10 people, sort of hiring talent flows a little bit different than Ubisoft, that's sort of managing a talent base of 6,000 people across the whole country. Give us a sense from the indie side, kind of, are you hiring from schools? How are you finding your talent? What's it like to build a team as a smaller independent studio here in Canada?
Well, I don't know if I can speak for all of the indie studios in Canada. I haven't compared notes on this with too many others, but I can say that for KitFox, our #1 recruiting tool has been social media. Twitter is where we have found the last 5 hires that we've had. We're the more official indie hiring. I think a lot of other indies just hire somebody that they admire on social media and then they start working together. Whereas we go through the whole process of like an application and interviews and tests and things like that. And not everybody does. But yeah, I think finding talent is always really hard because there's so many amazing people out there, but trying to find an amazing person who is excited about what you're excited about and who has the time right now to join your project. Even if they are the perfect person, if they're not available for 6 months, well, you have to find someone less perfect probably. And actually, I've met a lot of really talented game developers from Brazil. Our lead programmer, our employee #1, is Marcelo Perez, originally from Sao Paulo. And it's been wonderful to see the different kinds of people that you can hire if you're willing to look outside. I mean, that's the indie problem, is that because we don't have, recruiters and HR specialists and all this kind of thing, it's just us trying to find amazing people out there. And so usually if someone wants to go indie and join indie games, my #1 advice is to join Twitter, because that's how you're going to get to know people. That's how you're going to be more visible. Of course, I have a portfolio also, but all the normal hiring stuff. But I think if you're not present online somewhere, you're giving yourself a real disadvantage as far as companies like KitFox.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know you were hiring via Twitter. That's, I guess.
I mean, that's just we put our job post up, and then we find out 90% of our applicants found us through Twitter. So.
All right. Well, I wonder how many folks Ubisoft hires through Twitter. But Francis, I mean, one of the things we see in Canada is that there's always more studios being set up, whether it's new indie studios, new startups, or whether it's large multinational studios coming to Canada. And even just in the recent year, we've had NetEase from China setting up, and Don't Nod from France, and a handful of others. And I always get the question, at what point is it too many studios? At what point do we run out of this, call it natural resource of Canadian talent? So I'm curious to hear, from the Ubisoft perspective, how are you able to continue to build your studios, even in this context where there's always new studios showing up in town to also go after that talent? Maybe you can give us some insight on that.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the most important thing is not the number of new studios coming in, it's the pace of arrival of those new studios. So if you bring 13 studios in the same year, for sure it's going to put a lot of pressure, because everybody needs to start with a core team, and so everybody will be after the same senior people all of a sudden. If you pace the arrival of the new studios over 2-3 years, so those same 13 companies coming in over 2-3 years, you pace the stress that you put on the entire ecosystem. And that's really important. And I think, and I did not talk ever about this to the economic agencies, but what we've seen is really a gradual pace of growth. Like year over year, if you were to ask Jason, that growth is about 10%. So if you look at the capacity of the pool versus the requirement or the need of those companies, as long as you pace the arrival of the new companies, you are able to grow naturally that pool of talent, and you're able to give the newbies the capacity to be mentored by a more senior person that can be, sticking together with the junior person for a year, 2 years, or 3 years. So my message to everybody, as usual, is to say, for sure, it's great that we grow the industry, but let's protect the ecosystem, because if you break that ecosystem, you're not going to have one anymore, because larger companies will go out and smaller companies will say, I can't find talent. So let's make sure we pace the arrival. So that's very important. The other thing that is important is that not only can we rely on a pool of local talent coming out of those universities, as Jason said, but just as Tanya said, we are also able to rely on people outside of Canada. So we have a great program in Canada that allows us to bring international talent, especially programmers and game designers and very talented people, to Canada using a red carpet approach that was set up by the Canadian government. So if you're a highly talented employee and that you're going to make a difference in whether it's a Kitfox, a smaller studio, or a Ubisoft larger studio, we are able to use the same program and get the best talent from outside Canada through the door.
Wonderful. Yeah. Well, good. Thanks for that insight. All right, switching gears a little bit away from the talent side and talking now more about the funding and sort of the programs available. Actually, just a quick note, we will open the floor shortly for any questions from the audience. So don't be shy, put in the chat. You can type it in Portuguese. We have someone handling translation stuff. So if you have any questions, just put them in the chat. We'll open the floor shortly. All right, so going a bit to the other side of the equation, which is the access to funding, incentives, etc. Tanya mentioned before the Canadian Media Fund, which is something that does support game production. And then we have the various tax incentives across the different provinces that Francis had mentioned. Jason, maybe you can give us a little high-level recap of the R&D incentives and sort of anything kind of that would be broadly applicable for folks working in games in Canada.
So yeah, I mean, federally, there aren't as many incentives for video game development as there are provincially. In Quebec and Ontario, there are funds for smaller independent productions, as well as the tax incentives. Federally, like Jason said, there is the Canada Media Fund. The issue with the Canada Media Fund is that it is I don't want to say a cultural funding mechanism, because it is not. It is an economic investment tool that this organization will invest in your game, but it's for Canadian-owned companies only. So if you're a Brazilian company and you set up in Canada, you could have some challenges getting that approved. But it's not impossible, but it's for foreign companies that set up subsidiaries or something like that in Canada. They would be clearly ineligible for that. So that's one thing that there on the federal level. So it's good to just make that clear with the Canada Media Fund. And then there's the scientific research and experimental development, which again is much more lucrative for Canadian-owned companies. As Francis or others may attest, it is not nearly as competitive for foreign-owned companies as it is for Canadian-owned companies. So the point that I'm making is that the best incentives are coming from the various provinces that you may set up in. From a federal perspective, it's not so much about incentives as it is about bigger issues, like Francis talked about, immigration. So actually being able to get your staff into the country, being able to ensure that we're keeping regulatory requirements for things like privacy, in-app purchases, anti-competition law. So for instance, in the United Kingdom right now, my counterpart is dealing with a total nightmare around loot boxes, in-app purchases, and just immersive technology and its inherent problems, as they would say in the UK Parliament. I'm happy to say that in Canada, we aren't dealing with any of those issues. The federal government does look at video games as a positive contributor to both Canadian society and to Canadian economics. So I would say that from a federal perspective, it's less about the incentives and more about a lot of the bigger issues that perhaps aren't going to affect your bottom line today, but are much more important in the broad scheme of the environment and the overall business environment here.
Right. All right. Yeah. And those are important clarifications. And then just to add, at the provincial level, in most cases, those incentives, there's no difference in terms of ownership. If you're in that province doing work, hiring staff, then you have generally full access to all the different incentives.
Yeah, correct. They don't have the same ownership requirements, and that's why the incentives are so lucrative, right? And it's in other countries where they have cultural tests and ownership tests, you're not seeing the level of foreign investment into those countries that you're seeing in Canada. It's because our tax incentives are not cultural policy; they're economic policy that are designed to create jobs, not to create Canadian content. So right. Everybody's welcome.
Yeah, good point. All right, Tanya, maybe sort of on the flip side of the funding incentives and programs, maybe we can just speak a moment about the community programs. Of course, you hinted at some of the stuff that you're involved in Pixels in particular. I helped to co-found something called Gameplay Space, which is a co-working space in downtown Montreal. That's we run workshops and host networking events. It's been a bit quiet this past few months, of course. But Tanya, if you can give maybe some concrete examples of different support programs or community-driven programs that exist, and totally fine if to plug Pixels and the work you're doing there.
Sure. Yeah. Well, when I came to Montreal with a bigger studio, I immediately was delighted to find that there was this monthly meetup group where people would come and everyone was welcome, whether they were, at a big studio or a little studio or academic or a student or whoever, and everybody would come and share their little prototypes. Now that group, unfortunately, stopped existing after about 5 years, but there have been various other groups, and right now I think there's one called Flop that was operating out of Concordia and then out of Gameplay Space, maybe. But my point is that there always seems to be a group of people who are encouraging each other's artistry and innovation, and I found that society was very inspiring to me, regardless of how my day job was doing. Like, I love games. I love games as an art form. I love games as a cultural an energy and as a community. And so being able to, on the weekend have a beer with other people who feel that way was really exciting. Even though some of them worked, at Ubisoft and some of them worked at some studio you've never heard of. Or they were a chemist during the day, and just at night they do their own little experiments with Unity. But I've also found it very helpful to go to see talks at things like MIGs, or Mega MIGs. I'm not sure what they're calling it these days, but the fact that big platform holders will come by and visit because they feel Canada is somewhere that they should go and be aware of what's going on with the local communities. So whenever there's some kind of event, if you're on the various mailing lists, you'll hear about like, oh, well, there's going to be talks given by Microsoft or by Valve or by Nintendo. And so you can go there and not only learn about the platform, but you can actually meet people that are, working at these companies and making important decisions about their policies. And I found that extremely helpful, just because I think half of succeeding as a small developer is that network of knowing who to ask your questions, because you're never going to know everything. and things are changing all the time. So like if you're curious, well, what's going on with, you know, Microsoft Game Pass? Like I want to know what's going on with Game Pass on Xbox. Like what's happening with Epic, or what's happening with whatever. Like knowing who to ask, or who to ask to introduce you to somebody has been a huge benefit. And I think that's been the main thing that I've been professionally interested in. And you mentioned Pixels. I don't think I actually mentioned Pixels by name before. Pixels is a nonprofit specifically for helping more women make games and other marginalized genders, so non-binary people, gender fluid people, trans people. And I do that in my evenings and weekends, and it's because I believe in games as an art form, and I feel like right now it's mostly men who are making that art form, which, you know, you're making cool games, men, but maybe other people would make would enjoy that art form if they made it for themselves. And it feels like Pixels has taken off in Canada because of this community spirit, but also because of the healthy economic side of it. We have a lot of people who are curious about, like, well, can I make a living making games? Can I make this into, you know, my dream job? And so there's a lot of women who are currently working in film or animation or dentistry or whatever, and Pixels is a way that they can look at both the art side and the professional side of game making. And there's various other organizations like that around.
Wonderful. Yeah, and thank you. I think Pixels is such a great initiative and community program. All right, let's turn to some of the questions that I'm seeing pop up in the chat. This one is directed to Francis. It's a Ubisoft specific question about the Ubisoft graduate program. And Guillermo is asking if you'll be opening up applications for 2021, and if so, when will that application period be? What can you tell us about the Ubisoft graduate program? Francis, I think Francis, you're muted again.
Sorry. Yes, the answer to your question is yes. The graduate program will come back. It's actually going to be expanded with a stronger focus on certain regions. Not every studio participates in the graduate program, so very important to check on the internet for that. As an example, in Canada, we have the Ontario studio participating in the graduate program, and whereas studios in Quebec do not. So just check out the rules, check out the details of who participated in that program, and for sure, very happy to see your interest in the graduate program.
Cool. All right. Another question is, I guess maybe Tanya will probably be the one to answer this one, but it's about talent and how do you compete for talent? Kind of what we talked a little bit about before. Given all the big studios are around, how are you able to bring on talent? Despite the fact that there's all these other big studios around.
Well, I'll say that salary is hard. We definitely are slightly below average in terms of the amount of money that we deposit into your bank account. And depending on the person, if you prefer working on Assassin's Creed, like if that's your dream job, you should probably not work at an indie company, because I think you'll be dissatisfied. But if you're the kind of person that really wants to make 25% of a game, if you want to be the only artist on a game and really do everything for that little game, the game might only reach a few 100,000 people instead of a few million people, but it'll be more meaningful for you. And if that's something that's interesting to you, even though it's a bit scary, and even though it's a bit, what's the word? Scrappy. Like you're not sure if you can do all the art in a game, but you're ready to try. So for people like that, it's a very appealing proposition to say, well, you can come with us, make this amazing little game that couldn't exist without you. It would be a completely different game if we hired someone else. And even on a team of 6 people or 10 people, you're going to have such a huge impact on that game. Like you're really going to be able to put your heart into it and really get to know all the players, for better or worse. And basically, we offer some perks as well. Like we for KitFox at least, we promise that we won't make you do overtime for more than a couple weeks near launch. We don't do months of overtime. Of course, we have, I don't know, we have game nights and coffee and whatever, but that's the case for most of the studios. It's really a question of lifestyle and what kinds of games you want to make, because for people who like indie games, there's no replacement. So that's what we try to do. We try to make our games as good as possible to attract the best people. But I think that's every studio.
Yeah, well, and I think the point that you're trying to make is that you're not necessarily competing purely on financial terms. It's you know.
Oh, I really hope not.
Yeah, different vectors. All right, another question. Maybe this is one that Jason can take. Kind of about the sort of national connectedness, and are we seeing you know, talent from one province getting hired in studios in other provinces? And that kind of mobility between provinces.
Yeah, I definitely think that happens all the time, and not only from other provinces, but from other countries as well. But yeah, within Canada, there's lots of people that move from one province to the other. As Francis said, I come from a very small province in Nova Scotia, and you know, when that industry started kind of growing, it was essentially everybody that came there was from somewhere else. You know, when HB Studios started making games for Electronic Arts, you know, there was like 5 people there, and they grew to, you know, almost 200 people. And you know, the vast majority of those people came from all over the place. And you know, I certainly can't comment on individual situations with studios, but yeah, I think that the industry is well connected. People that, you know, want to work on FIFA might want to move to Vancouver, or if you are much more interested in hiking and snowboarding, you know, you're going to move to Vancouver. If you're interested in, you know, a big American style city, you might move to Toronto. And if you want that, you know, that European French experience working on, you know, like Tanya said, Assassin's Creed, or, you know, one of a number of other big games, you're going to move to Montreal. So, like, I think it's just one, personal choice, and 2, what type of title do you want to work on, and then you'll make a decision as to where you want to go. But I think it's pretty connected, and I'd like to think that our organization and, you know, other organizations like ours, you know, keep the industry connected, because we have members all the way from Victoria to St. John's, Newfoundland. So, you know, from one coast to the next, and everybody works together, and we try to keep everyone in the loop as to what's going on. So yeah, I'd like to think for a large country, we're a pretty connected industry. I mean, for sure, everybody has their own silos and their own ways, but you know, I think for a big country like Canada, it's about as connected as it's probably going to be.
Sure. Yeah, and of course, Canada being a very wide country, you know, when we say coast to coast, it's
yeah.
Certainly, as a Montrealer, it's faster for me to go to London or Paris than it is to go to the other side of Canada. But yeah, of course, Brazil is also a very large country. There's a question here about the incentives, and I think I'll actually take this one. Wagner is asking if it's possible to access the government incentives if a Brazilian studio simply has a sales office in Canada. And the quick answer is no, because most of the provincial incentives are based on multimedia production labor costs. So you're getting a tax credit, tax return based on programmer, artist, you know, designer wages. So if all you have is an office here with a couple of salespeople, then their function as salespeople don't qualify for the multimedia labor-oriented credits. There might be some other kind of random businessy stuff that's sort of generic and not game industry specific, but that's sort of the quick take. I don't know, Jason, if you have I mean, did I get that right, or did you want to add some nuance there?
No, you're right. I mean, like I said earlier, these provincial credits are based on job creation, and they're based on developing products. So if you're just selling something, there's really no incentives for that. What the government wants you to do is to create, high-skilled tech jobs that, are going to result in the creation of a product. And that's really where the incentives come into play. So yes, right. Just selling something is not going to qualify you for.
Curious, they have other creative skills like screenwriting and pre-production stuff, but they're not programmers, and they're wondering, is really that the only opportunity to come into Canada if you're a programmer? How else would you be able to approach that?
Yeah, well, there's multiple ways. Oops, sorry. Yeah, there's multiple ways to come into Canada, but you have to go through one of the stream that exists. So you may come in as a foreign student. You may come in as a foreign expert. So I think the most important thing is to speak with the people from the council, from the embassy, from the consulate. Go on the Canadian immigration website and make sure that you can correspond to one of the stream that exists. Now, on top of that, to answer your questions about Ubisoft, it's very difficult for me because I don't know your exact background. But since we have a studio in Sao Paulo, it may actually be a good pathway to access other studios in the world of Ubisoft to go through Sao Paulo. A great way to land in our company globally to start to join the local studio.
Yeah, and thank you, Francis. You mentioned students. That was one of the other questions, asking specifically about any kind of expedited pathway for a student from Brazil to come in to kind of do a work term or a work term and a study term. Do you have any knowledge about the student-oriented opportunities?
I'm not an expert in immigration laws or work permit, but again, I would encourage you to talk to Claudia, talk to Marcelo. They may be able to give you more details about the different stream. But if you want to come and study in Canada, I can guarantee that there is a stream for that, and there is a lot of interest from universities in Canada to welcome you into their range. So clearly, if you're coming to study in Canada, there's going to be a welcoming open arms.
Cool. Marcelo, are you still, can you maybe jump in and add a quick answer there if you have some knowledge? I don't know if he's able to, or maybe he's not. Oh yeah, Marcelo, can you comment on the student visas, student permits?
Yeah, well, I'm not an expert on this. I might just answer that in Portuguese.
Okay, go ahead.
So it doesn't get lost in translation. We do have a team at the office that might be able to answer better, but I'll just say that in português. Nós temos uma equipe no consulado que trabalha com toda a parte de educação. Basicamente, existem algumas parcerias, alguns acordos de colaboração entre universidades canadenses e universidades brasileiras. Eu vi o e-mail, a mensagem do interessado, a gente vai passar para esse time para que eles possam responder. Basically, Jason, I'm just saying that we do have an education team here based at the office in São Paulo. They're the ones leading on the relationship between Canadian educational institutions and Brazilian ones. So there are existing partnerships.
Cool.
Mostly it's on language training. There are some professional training as well. So what we'll do is we'll redirect the question and hopefully they will be able to answer shortly.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. All right, so another question that's come up is about being a Brazilian studio and pitching your game to Canadian publishers. I'll respond there and say that Canada doesn't really have publishers. It's a bit sort of deceptive in that many of the big kind of global publishers like Ubisoft, Electronic Arts, Square Enix, etc., Warner Brothers, many of them have offices here in Montreal, although for the most part, those offices are production centers. Not always, but mostly. And so if you wanted to pitch, for example, EA, you wouldn't pitch them anywhere here in Canada. You would have to pitch them in their London office because that's where the head of EA Originals is, or their Stockholm office because that's where the EA Originals group is, just as one example. So there are not so many publishing, or call it business development offices that are here in Canada. So even though the logos are here and they're making games here, they're not really publishing games from here. I don't know, Francis, if you wanted to, give us a sense of, where is Ubisoft's kind of third-party business development going on, and any kind of insight with respect to, being a global entity, and if you were to take a pitch from a Brazilian studio, where would that pitch go?
Yeah, well, you might see that over time we exited the third-party publishing and focused really on our own IPs. However, what we do have, and there's a very strong connection, especially in Quebec and Ontario and Germany and France, is a very strong relationship with the indies. So we're not there to say we're going to publish you. We're there to say, how can we work together? How can we help you? Just to give you an idea, in Quebec, we launched the Indie series. It's been there for 4 years now. And so we were able to give out prize money, give out mentoring, give out access to our user research lab to companies that you may know, companies like Sabotage Game, companies like Chains Awesome Game in Quebec City, companies like Thunder Lotus that just launched Spiritfarer. So, although we are no longer in the business of publishing third parties, we are in the business of helping indie companies. Now, unfortunately, we do it where we have larger operations, but we have one group that you may have heard of, which is the Open Innovation Accelerator. It's based out of Paris. It's a newly formed group that is actually going to do that connection with indie companies around the world. So if you're interested to connect with them, just email me and I'll make the introduction.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you for.
I can be found on LinkedIn, by the way. So.
Cool. All right, maybe now a question for Tanya. This one being kind of COVID, pandemic oriented, and if you can comment on kind of what the working environment was pre-COVID versus now, kind of work for home, and what your thoughts are kind of going forward in the future, if kind of work from home will be the new normal.
Well, I definitely think I personally don't miss most of the commute. The winters here are pretty intense, and I like riding my bicycle in the summer, but it certainly is more comfortable at home. And so I think a lot of people are realizing that they are sometimes as productive, sometimes more productive when they're working from home. So my personal prediction is that some portion of our industry are realizing that they always want to work from home, maybe a majority of the time. However, I think that there are certain parts of game development, especially towards the beginning when you're aligning everyone's vision, that you have to be in person. I think there's no replacement for people spending some hours together, really coalescing their ideas together. And so even the studios who have been remote and working from home for 10 years now, they also tend to have retreats physically together a couple times a year. And so I don't know what the future holds for KitFox, but if we are typical for our size of game studio, I'm going to bet that most of us are going to go mostly work from home, mostly remote indefinitely for the next several years. Just for the comfort and because now we understand the logistics a lot better, and so it's been normalized, and I think it's definitely going to be a perk for some people, and other people will absolutely want to go to the office, 4 or 5 days out of the week. But I think they'll be the minority, for better or worse.
Yeah. Interesting how everyone's sort of reacting. Francis, did you want to give a perspective from Ubisoft? I mean, obviously, taking 6,000 people and putting them at home is probably a much bigger logistical headache. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, we actually did it. So thanks to our IT experts scattered throughout the studios, we were able to actually move 6,000 people in a work from home within a week on March 12 to March 18. So that was a pretty impressive situation. So we're seeing people coming back. I think it's work is going to change. The studios are going to change as well, as Tanya said. People realize that they can work from home, and the company also realized that people can work from home. So we're likely going to move to a half and half type situation. I think what I'm hearing from the troops here is that people miss each other. People miss the area. We are in a very cool, hype area in Montreal, and same in Quebec City. So people, they want to find their commerce back. They want to find their restaurant back. We actually supported the commerce back in June when things reopened in Montreal by offering every employee a $25 coupon to actually spend at a restaurant or at any store. Now, it doesn't sound like much, $25, but when you have 6,000 employees, you end up having a big bill. But that was really appreciated by the commerce locally, and so that relationship with the Myland in Montreal and Quartier Saint-Roch in Quebec is really important. So I think people will want to come back and live that experience of being together in that area and going to get your coffee and going to get your lunch. But definitely, it's going to evolve, and it will never be the same exactly.
Right. Yeah, and that's not a Canada thing, of course. That's sort of obviously a worldwide challenge that we're all dealing with. All right, well, we're out of time. So what I'm going to do is say a big thank you to our 3 panelists. So big thanks to Francis and Jason and Tanya. And before we let you go, I'm going to hand it over to Claudia, who's also part of the Canadian government, just to close it off and make some final remarks. Claudia, can you unmute and jump on?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Jason. It was a great session. Thank you so much for that. Let me switch to Portuguese now. Oi, pessoal, meu nome é Cláudia Kakunaka, não sei se todo mundo me conhece, eu trabalho no Consulado do Canadá, aqui em São Paulo, tá? Trabalho com o Marcelo, a gente atua junto nesse setor de games, tá? Desenvolvendo atividades, iniciativas, tá? Então vocês vão ouvir falar bastante da gente. Eu espero queria agradecer, né, a participação de vocês nesse webinar, espero que vocês tenham gostado do conteúdo, né? A gente tentou trazer aqui pessoas chaves da indústria, né, que possam falar um pouquinho sobre o Canadá e os benefícios, né, de ter um estúdio, seja ele um estúdio grande, um estúdio pequeno, né? Então, acho que foi uma boa sessão, eles deram bastante insights para a gente, espero que vocês tenham gostado, tá bom? E aí, eu queria também, let me turn to English again, I wanted to thank all the panelists, Francis, Jason Hughes, Tanya, thank you so much for the great discussions and the insights. It's always good to count on you to promote the Canadian gaming industry, so thank you so much for that. E também para o pessoal da Abra Games, claro, né, a parceria de sempre. Queria agradecer a Eliana, a Marina, né, toda a equipe. Eles deram a oportunidade de a gente trabalhar nesse webinar do AbraTalks, dessa série que eles estão desenvolvendo, né, uma super oportunidade para a gente também, a gente está bem feliz com o resultado, uma participação muito grande, né, a gente nem estava esperando tanta gente, então foi super bacana, a gente está à disposição, Se não deu para responder todas as perguntas, a gente tem registrado aqui, tá? A gente vai retornar para aquelas perguntas que não ficaram sem respostas, tá? E essa sessão está sendo gravada também, então em breve a gente também vai disponibilizar o vídeo no YouTube, tá bom? Então, gente, muito obrigada, fiquem bem, fiquem seguros e até a próxima, tá bom? Tchau, tchau.
Tchau. Obrigado.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Obrigado!
Obrigada, tchau, tchau.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.